You probably already know this, but New York City has a dark and bloody history when it comes to the Mafia. From shocking assassinations to legendary power plays, the streets of this city have witnessed some of the most infamous moments in organized crime history. Today, we're taking you to 5 real locations where these chilling events actually happened. You might walk by these places every day without realizing their dark pasts. Buckle up because this one gets wild. Our first stop is at 210 East 46th Street between 2nd and 3rd Avenue in Midtown Manhattan. So, if you've seen Gotti or Boss of Bosses, you've heard of this one. December 16th, 1985, Paul Castellano, the boss of the Gambino family, thought he was heading to a nice steak dinner. Instead, he was ambushed outside Sparks Steakhouse, gunned down in the middle of the street. John Gotti sat nearby, watching his biggest rival eliminated, paving his way to the top.
He died on an empty stomach. And because it happened that way, the theory is the biggest Mafia rub-out of the decade took place with considerable help from inside the dead mobster's family. 6 shell casings were on the pavement of East 46th Street, right next to the body of Paul Castellano Sr., the top mafiosi in the United States.
And Sparks is still open and still in business.
More interesting to detectives is how the hit team knew to wait for Castellano near the corner of 46th and 3rd.
Next up, over in Little Italy, we have Umberto's Clam House. The restaurant was opened in 1972 at 129 Mulberry Street at the northwest corner of Mulberry and Hester Street. On April 7th, 1972, Joe Gallo, better known as Crazy Joe, was celebrating his birthday when hitmen stormed in and opened fire. Gallo tried to escape but collapsed on the street, marking one of the most dramatic mob hits in NYC history.
20 years ago, Joseph Gallo, also known as Crazy Joe, began to rise in the Brooklyn underworld during a gang war that led to a dozen deaths. Morning, Gallo himself was shot to death while celebrating his 43rd birthday in a restaurant in Manhattan's Little Italy section.
Today, Umberto's has moved down the block to 132 Mulberry Street, but the original location still holds its eerie legacy.
These 14 persons witnessed the killing, including Gallo's wife, a bride of 3 weeks.
Now let's head over to the Flatlands neighborhood of Brooklyn to a local mob hangout. This place might be the scariest on the list. Roy DeMeo and his crew used the Gemini Lounge as a slaughterhouse in the 70s and 80s. The FBI believes over 100 people were murdered and dismembered inside.
Roy DeMeo crew, a Gambino gang that operated behind this Brooklyn bar until 1983. A gang that scared even John Gotti. Over a 10-year period, officials estimate the gang killed up to 200 people. Their meeting place was known as the Horror Hotel.
This is the Horror Hotel. This was the place where the DeMeo crew chopped up the bodies of their murder victims and packaged them and shipped them off to the dump. They disposed of a couple of dozen bodies here.
The Horror Hotel?
Horror Hotel, right.
Check in.
Never get out.
Today it's a church, but let's just say people still whisper about what happened there. Let's keep it in Brooklyn and head over to Joe and Mary's Italian-American restaurant in Bushwick. July 12, 1979, Bonanno family Capo Carmine Galante was eating lunch outside when masked gunmen took him out. The most famous part? His cigar was still in his mouth when he died.
Some found it almost poetic that Carmine Galante, the man known as the Cigar to his friends in the mob, was blown away with a Monte Cristo clenched between his teeth. At the time of the 1979 hit in the rear garden of Joe and Mary's restaurant in Bushwick, Brooklyn, Galante was the boss of bosses of the New York mob. He got there because of his fearsome reputation for solving his family problems by brute force. Galante was arrested back in 1930 for killing a cop in Brooklyn. He beat that rap, but 4 months later was wounded himself as he shot a detective and 2 children during a robbery.
This spot on Knickerbocker Avenue is now just another storefront, but that image? Mafia history forever. Lastly, we're heading back to the island of Manhattan to the Park Sheraton Hotel. And this next one is straight out of a movie. In 1957, Albert Anastasia, the brutal boss of Murder, Inc., was getting a shave at the Park Sheraton Hotel's barbershop when gunmen stormed in and shot him dead. The image of his lifeless body laid out on the floor is legendary.
We recovered a gun with 5 shots fired. We've also recovered a 32 bullet, no second gun.
Talking to the witnesses, Chief, how was he shot?
They walked up and back and shot him in the head. He fell from the chair, so he fired again.
He was getting a haircut at the time, sir?
Oh, he's getting a shave.
Getting a shave.
Did they wait until he fell to the ground before they fired again?
No, he was falling and he kept on shooting.
Chief,
Assailants were apparently men in their late 30s, 40s, or early 40s. One about 5'10", one slightly shorter.
Today, it's the Park Central Hotel, but the location of the barbershop, still there. And there you have it. 5 real-life locations where the Mafia left its mark on New York City. These streets hold more than just history. They whisper stories of power, betrayal, and bloodshed. Next time you walk past one of these spots, you'll know the secrets hidden in plain sight. But then again, you probably already knew this.